Welcome to Catch You Outdoors. I'm your host, Captain Rob Modis. Contact email is catchyoutdoors@gmail.com. The website's catchyoutdoors.com. And our Facebook page, Catch You Outdoors. I've authored a couple of books over the past couple of years. The titles are Bridge to Paradise and What I Know About Fishing in Southwest Florida. They're both available on Amazon Kindle. Speaking of books, I got some great reviews and quite a few emailed kudos from my most recent edition, Bridge to Paradise. I'm really glad that you readers are liking it, digging it, as we used to say. I really wanted to put out a selection of stories, and I'm glad it came to fruition. I've got first edition copies. I still have some in stock. Post-Christmas, go to the website at catchyoutdoors.com. And down at the bottom, you can click on page 4 and go there and get one. If you buy one off the web, instead of doing the Amazon thing, I will sign it for you. So there you go. Today's episode is number 20. I can't believe it. I did it. I made it to 20. Titled, Fishing is Still My Life. Believe it or not, I don't fish near as much as I used to, but, I consider myself a very lucky guy because I do get to do it. And when I do it, I know enough about it to be dangerous. So I have a wonderful wife, great kids, lots of grandkids. I have a big extended family, got lots of good friends who also fish, and some who don't. That's okay. I live in Florida where it's warm and COVID worries are low, but still treated with respect. And there's some of the best fishing in the world here. I mean, it's unreal. It's really remarkable. If you draw a line across Florida in the south side of it, just make it at Okeechobee, you have a tremendous amount of water on the southwest coast that runs down from the Fort Myers area in general, Sanibel, Captiva, Punta Gorda, you can go with Punta Gorda, Charlotte Harbor, all the way down into the Everglades on that side. And on this side, you have the Palm Beach County area running all the way south to the Florida Keys. So just imagine, if you will, how prolific South Florida is. Now, I'm not picking on the upper west coast of Florida or the upper east. Jacksonville, my gosh, Jacksonville does really, really well with very large fish off jacks. So for those of you looking for something different, you might want to check into that. There's also a big cobia migration that happens on the west coast up by the Panhandle. So there are things in Florida that I don't talk about much because I'm not that experienced with it, but I know of it. And I know of people that talk about it quite a bit. But we're really lucky. We really are. Where we are, it's great. This winter's been a little much for one lousy week. I'm just teasing. I did that for those that listen up north. Yeah, we had a winter. It was about a week long. I'm guessing it's over, I hope. It's back. Today is 81. Yesterday was 81, and the nighttime temperatures are right around 70. So it's what I call perfect, absolutely perfect, nice and sunny, and it's dry. The rain stopped. So, but this winter has been a little much in bits and pieces overall. A little bit of December and a whole lot of January. And I'm ready for summer. I'm a summer boy. I like summer a lot. I like sun. I like warm water. I like heat. And that's because the fish like it too. So while we do fish year round, I'm not going to say we struggle in the winter. We do pretty well. But we don't drill any holes in ice. But compared to other places, we really have it. We really have it good. And what's happening now is this water will start to warm. I saw a reading on the West Coast. I was just over there a couple of days ago. On the west coast of Florida, it was in the 50s, high 50s. One of my fellow captains reported that he'd run into 57, 58, I believe it was. Over here, our Atlantic temperature right now is 72. And it will remain that way until we get a stroke of warm, and then it'll jump right back up to 78 or so. That's our typical water temperature, is somewhere between 72 and 78 degrees in the winter until we get to late March and early April, when we start getting a lot more sunshine. Let's talk fishing for a bit. I was recently thinking about past trips, not charters, but those trips that happened when I was either young, pre-charter captain, or I had a day off while I was a charter captain. While I have great memories from those many days on the water via charter trips, I always longed for a little alone time on the water. You know what I mean. The boat's all yours. You go where you want. It's a very effective way to find fish and to find new places to fish. For those of you that run a business on a boat, charter captains, you know what I'm talking about. And even if you don't, even if you're just an individual with a boat, if you're not out with the family and the kids and the friends and all, you're just on the boat by yourself, you tend to be more thorough. You tend to work places much, much longer than you would with somebody on the boat, because with somebody on the boat, you're trying to please them and yourself. You're trying to get them a fish or two. You're trying to, you're trying to make them catch fish. It's the same thing in the charter business, only it's worse because it involves money. but but ultimately, it's kind of a scary proposition when you get out there by yourself. It's not like that. I'll pull into a small bay and I will work that bay to death, especially if I've never been in it before. I'll examine the bottom. I'll examine root structures that come off of the mangrove. I'll examine which way the water's moving and why. Like maybe there's a little creek that I need to know about. And so I won't take that kind of time with either a customer or a friend on the boat. We just don't. Heck, my brother and I have fished together for years. We fish like a business when the two of us are on the boat. It's not the most relaxing day in the world. It's enjoyable because I love fishing with my brother, but it's definitely not the most relaxing day either. On one such day, all by my lonesome, I had a no-show from a client due to family illness. I simply got in a boat and took off with no special place in mind. I went north. I worked Estero Bay primarily at this time. So I went north in Estero Bay. And I had made up my mind that I was not going to stop in all of my usual spots. I wanted to run into a bay called Hell Peckney Bay, which is up on the north end of the Estero Bay area, the Estero Bay estuary. I decided I wanted to run up there and spend more time there. I had fished quite a bit in the lower Halpecny and the far eastern edges of it, but I really hadn't done much in the real north. I mean, I've fished a few redfish out of there, things like that. But there were a couple areas on a chart that kind of fascinated me that I just had not gone to. And one of them was this little creek, which I later found out actually had a name. I haven't seen it on too many charts, but it appeared. And I was talking to somebody else about this, and they said, "Oh, you mean Cow Creek?" And I went, "Cow Creek?" It makes sense because it runs up into a pasture area that you would never know is a pasture area unless you'd been on the other side, working south. A friend of mine named Travis, if you're listening, you'll know where I'm talking about. Um, so I wound up in the very north end of Halpecny. And after getting to the very back, or the top, I guess, of the bay, I shut down. I set the trolling motor in the water. I headed up to that little area that I'd never been in before. The water was about a foot deep, very clear, which is all your warning bells are going off. I don't care to fish in real clear water in West Coast water. I would much rather have a little tinge, a little, I don't know, tannin from the mangrove, redness, or just a little turbidity. So that you might see the bottom in 2 to 3, but you're certainly not going to see it in or 1 to 2 rather, but you're certainly not going to see it in 3. And I really that's what I tend to look for when I'm fishing. And so here it was, like, I mean, really clear, no tannin, no nothing in this water. And again, I moved into this little thing called Cow Creek, and it wasn't really navigable by most boats. This thing was really skinny, about a foot deep, I would guess. It would have been much better if I'd taken a kayak, if I could get a kayak up that far. Man, you'd wear yourself getting there in a kayak, I would have to think. I came around a bend, and I was met by two exiting snook. You all that fish, you know what I mean. These are the ones. If you fish for snook, these are the ones that you spooked out, and they come by you not in a hurry. They don't run. They don't blast out. They just swim by, letting you know that you completely screwed up. That's their whole. Snook are evil. That's their whole goal, is to, if they could put thumbs in ears, they would, and just that kind of thing. These are the ones you know you aren't going to hook up with once you've seen them because they've already seen you. Plain and simple. Both were really good size. I'm going to estimate in the mid 30s, 33 to 36 or so, um, almost twins, and they slinked by almost side by side, like maybe half body to half body. Pretty wild. I'll never forget it. I came to a dead stop. I shut the trolling motor down. I sat down. I got real quiet. The boat drifted just a little bit and then it quit because I was moving real slow anyway. Um, as the boat settled, uh, there was a little bit of outbound current, so I knew water was running out. So the boat didn't keep going up the creek. It kind of stopped. And I turned around and I tiptoed back to the console and pulled a rod, which was already rigged. Now, this is the cool part of the story. The thing was already rigged with a brand new lure that I had never used before. It was made by Mirror, and it's called the 19MR. It was one of the first lures that a guy named Dino Hicks had given me. Dino ran a shop called Reels Inc., and he latched onto me, and I latched onto him. And I was in the shop, and he gave me three or four of only. There was only one color at the time when he first got them. They were all kind of a silvery white color. And he said, in the Dino voice, here, try these, And I'm like, okay. And so I put them on the boat. Let me pause here for a second, since my brain's going in a different direction. Dino was the host of Real Talk Radio, the original host. And again, he owned this shop called Reels Inc., which was in San Carlos Park. And this was not your average everyday fishing shop. Not saying that any of them are. This one was just unusual. He had a lot of rod building going on in it. He had an influx of people that I enjoy being around because we all talked fishing. This place was more like a bar without the booze. It was just amazing. And Dino's personality is impossible to describe. If you've been around him, then you all know what I'm talking about. But if not, I'm sorry you missed out on it. It's like he was a pirate, but he was a gentle pirate. He was really, really smart. He knew his way around the business better than anybody that I've ever run into. We met in early 2000 during the battle over the manatee zones in Lee County. I say battle for a reason. The manatee folks pretty much wanted to get as much water access as possible shut down to boaters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody. They really didn't want anybody in the areas that they were trying to close off due to what would seem like the impending demise of the species. Manatees were in trouble. I'm not going to kid you. I'm a realist. When my brother and I first began fishing in Pine Island Sound, 1980-ish, I guess it was. So yeah, somewhere in the early 80s, we started hitting that area pretty hard. If you saw a manatee in one manatee in a day, it would be a miracle. If you saw two or three in an entire week, it would be a miracle. It really was. It really was. There were very, very, very few of them in the area. They congregated. People knew where they were, but out in the open water, you just didn't see them that often. So there was concern. We weren't really upset about saving the manatee. We were more upset by the way the powers that be were going about it, and there really didn't seem to be much thought in that process. At least to us, it didn't. They had their science, but very little firsthand knowledge like we water people did. And they didn't ask us. they would just never come to us and say, okay, what do you think about this? It almost, I don't think it didn't ever happen to me, I know, and some of my friends. And those of us that spent a lot of time on the water probably should have been asked about patterns. We, the fishing folks, I'm not going to speak for every boater, but the fishermen on the water, especially the guides, we promoted a learning agenda. We felt that the problem with the manatee was not so much that the numbers were falling because they're sick or whatever. They were getting hit by boats. There's no doubt about that. But we felt that a learning agenda would be just as good, if not better, than locking everything up and keeping people out. People needed to be taught about the manatee and how to avoid running over them and hitting them. We wanted access to the water, but we also wanted to teach fellow boaters. I mean, it was that simple, especially new boaters and winter visitors, how to recognize the marks that manatees make on the water so they could be better avoided. We told those that would listen that growing the population would be great. We sat in a lot of meetings, but it would have to be closely monitored from the standpoint that we felt that too many manatees would also be a problem. Grass was slowly, back at that time, disappearing in the bays of Lee County. Yes, it was happening back in 2000, in early 2000s when I first noticed it. Got worse and worse and worse, and we sounded the alarm. But they really weren't listening. Their stand was more about multiplying the species without looking at how to sustain the higher numbers. Well, well, well. If you've been following the latest news, manatees are actually starving all over the southern portions of the state of Florida, including over here on the east side where I live. I know manatees, the focus was really around Lee County. Lee County, Charlotte Harbor south into the 10,000. I mean, it's close this, close that. We need to get more manatees. Y'all need to stop boating, da 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 da. Nobody ever mentioned much about what was on the East Coast, what was happening. Well, it wasn't. The East Coast, you can run a boat anywhere you want. Florida Keys, you can run a boat anywhere you want. Well, guess what? The first hunger problems, starving problems, appeared down near Biscayne Bay, right over here where I am, near Miami. The problem is, what's happening is water quality. Plain and simple. The food is disappearing at a much more rapid rate now than it was back when this whole manatee thing started, mainly because of bad water quality. Not so much the very large number of manatees. I like to stress that. Everybody's like, well, there's so many manatees now, they're eating everything. No, that's not true. Well, yeah, they are eating everything that they can get their mouths on. The only problem is there isn't anywhere near as much as there used to be because of bad water quality. Bad water quality generally causes, I'm going to simplify this, it clouds the water, for lack of a better way. It Bad water quality will tinge the water, tint it to a point where sunlight can't get through. Your seagrasses work on a root system called rhizome. The rhizome is in the sand down deep, and that's what grows. And as the grasses die due to weather, horrible conditions like hurricanes, it comes back from the root, if you will. That's not happening because the water clouds up, the sun doesn't get through, and the grass won't grow. Anybody knows that if you don't have sunlight, you don't have grass growing. Take a great big giant oak tree, big maple tree for those of you up north. Does grass grow readily under those great big beautiful trees? No, because it's shaded. Some grass grows, but not very much and not very fast. Well, that's exactly what was happening in our bay systems. Excessive runoff seems to be the most likely culprit. We have far too many people on far too many septic systems, and we keep building like crazy. Something's got to give. So I'm not against manatees. Don't get me wrong. My customers loved seeing them. I could do a manatee trip. They were thrilled. The big three, the manatee, the dolphin, and an eagle. I mean, that was like the trifecta of being a guide in nature. So please don't get me wrong. What I'm upset about is no thought has been given into what would happen if water quality went to hell. And we had already seen it happening, so we knew things were not going to be good. And now we reached the point where we have a real serious problem. I saw a news story recently where it's okay. Well, I won't say it's okay. They are telling people over here that it's okay to feed lettuce to some of the manatees. We were always told never, never hand feed a manatee. Never give them anything. Never give a wild animal anything. You don't want to train them that way. So that's unfortunately how bad it's gotten. Oh, wow, I digressed. Okay, back to the fishing. As I was saying, after previously spooking two very nice snook out of their habitat, I very quietly picked up a rod with said mirror lure from Dino Hicks on it, rigged on it, and made a nice long cast up the creek. About two, maybe three twitches of the lure, and kapow. And I mean kapow. The mirror lure 19MR is a twitch bait. What that means is it's a hard bait, the kind like you'd use with a lip on the front, but it doesn't have a lip. The lip front lures, most notable in Missouri for me personally, you cast them, you reel at a certain speed, and they dive a little bit and they wiggle because of that lip on the front. Without the lip, you got to make the wiggle. You have got to partake motion and whatever zigzags and whatever you do with the lure. So when you throw the lure in the water, you have to actually work the rod tip to cause these lures to do what we call twitching, which is basically wiggling. They're very random. So it's not walking the dog. It's not a controlled, tat 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 type thing with the rod tip. This is something where that lure will go anywhere it wants to go. And that's the allure of that lure. I did it again. Anyway, yeah, because what fish like is something that's slow and dying. I mean, they'll go chase bait, of course, full blown bait in a school. But when they have one that's wiggling and doing weird stuff, or he's fallen out of the school, the protection of a school of bait, man, that's the target, and that's what you're trying to recreate. So the twitch baits are a lot of fun to use. Well, this snook just lit into this thing, which is my favorite thing in the world, to get something to pound something on the surface. And then, the hair on your arm stands up. The sound is incredible. The snook makes the most wonderful pop sound when it hits something. A friend of mine described it as taking an empty bucket and putting it in the water and then pushing it underwater so the water goes into the bucket. It makes that kaboom sound. That's exactly what it sounds like. Um, and then, as I like to say, the fun begins. After the fish exploded, he turned around and he ran away from me up the creek and over toward mangrove, which is also what snook are famous for. And I'm just doing the best I can to stop this thing. In the meantime, I look down by my feet and see two more large snook come cruising out of this area. I'm thinking to myself, bonus, this is really something. If I'd snuck up, I would maybe gotten two. Which, by the way, when you hook one snook, the chances of getting another one in exactly the same spot becomes less and less because they're extremely wary prey. So this thing ran, I want to say probably 3 times to the mangrove. I'll give you all a tip. If you are fishing close to mangrove or in a tight spot with snook, the first thing you want to do is get that rod tip in the water. Everybody has watched far too much television. I'm not picking on the TV fishermen, but they really like to put on a show. And part of that show is to bring that rod up and put that nice bow up above their head so you can see it on TV. Wow, look how bent that rod is. Well, that's the last thing you want to do with the snook. You want to get that rod down as low as you can, tip in the water. I generally try to put the first foot, if there's enough water, of the tip in, and then hang on and crank like crazy. If you're in the front of a boat that's, I don't know, 17 feet to 20 feet long, you might want to start walking to the back. Every little thing you do to pull that fish away from the mangrove helps. The reason you stuff the rod tip in the water, it's pretty simple. If you are doing the hi hat, that rod way up in the air, and it's curved, it's bent, the line comes down to the water at an angle. Fish runs in. Let's just hypothetically say it's 30-40 degree angle hitting the water at about that. Fish runs into the mangrove. You have a much better chance of being cut off because your line is in the air. It's up. It's parallel basically to the mangrove root or mangrove branch or anything else that might get in the way. If you stuff that rod tip in the water, you now have a line that's basically in line with the fish's mouth and head. So you've kept it in the water on the same plane. And that way, if the fish runs into mangrove and bangs around and comes back out, which they invariably do, by the way, you have much less chance of getting cut off by roots and things. So keep that in mind. It's a big snook tactic is what it is, and it works. Um, Crank like crazy, crank like crazy. As soon as that fish comes out, start moving forward on the boat. Keep cranking like crazy. Do the best you can to make up line because guess what? He's going to turn around and do exactly the same thing again. Might pick a new spot, but he's definitely going to try to run for that mangrove. That's safety. That's where they go. So he does that. I think this one probably, I'm trying to remember. This is a long time ago. I'm going to say probably 3 times at least. I know, it's hard to stop breathing for 10 whole minutes, but you tend to do that. You just hold your breath and you suddenly realize, I probably should breathe before I pass out. Got it out. I'm going to call her a her. She was about 36, 37 inches in length. I didn't measure. I kept her down in the water. I thumbed her. Carefully took that lure out. 2 nice big treble hooks that I had not mashed the barbs down on. It was brand new. I just, I got in a hurry, got excited. And took a good solid look at her, and I'm like, man, you are gorgeous, and then let her go. I proceeded after that to catch a redfish in the same area, and then I went out on the flats of Halpechney and hooked it up for trout and caught, oh, I don't know. I try not, let's just say 4 or 5 trout. Probably more than that, but 4 or 5 decent trout. And I got another snook out of the bushes down that way. And all I fished with that whole time, that whole morning, was just that mirror lure. So needless to say, I was tickled with it. So when I got home, I gave Dino a call and I said, you know what? He goes, don't tell me. He says, that box worked, didn't it? And I said, you bet it worked. And that little lure is amazing. He goes, well, that's what the people told me. He said it was a phenomenal lure. It was something new that mirror lure was just starting to do. It's really a remarkable change for back then. Today, there are so many new lures out there that are like this, but back then, it had this weird interior that shined. It had a nice wiggle to it. It was skinny, which kind of threw me. As a bait, the 19MR does not really look like anything other than maybe a skinny Spanish sardine or a tiny ballyhoo, something skinny and long. It doesn't really look like our pilchers or our threadfin herrings on either side of the state. It's not a fat bait or a tall bait. It was very skinny and long, maybe about 3.5, 4 inches long. Treble on the back, treble in the middle, toward, well, just forward of the middle. Um, so it was unusual, and it was very unusual in that it was a twitch bait. Had two great big red eyes on it. You'd have to, they haven't changed at all. If you buy one, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Dino was excited. I was excited. We showed it to other anglers that were guiding, and a whole bunch of people were on the bandwagon in about, oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks. Um, Dino was ordering them by the crate when he could get them. And then finally, colors came out, which made it even more spectacular. As just fishing this plain silvery bait worked, obviously, because most of our bait are kind of that color. But we wound up with there were a couple of greenbacks, which looked like greenies. There was one that was kind of lime green back and then a dark green. And then there was one that was black on the back, just the back. So that looks like a mullet. So they started playing with colors. There was a blue one. I never messed with a blue. They put a splash of red on some of them. I would try those, but I would invariably find myself going back to the original silver. And the funny thing is, today, in my garage, in my tackle boxes, I still have Mirrorlure 19MRs, and most of them are still this original silver color. That's what I just kept buying over and over again. It works. Don't mess with it, right? I mean, that's my theory. There are many other um, manufacturers out there who are building lures now that are very similar to the mirror lure, but not the same. I'll say that right now. Mirror lure over time came out with a 17MR to add to the 19. The 17 was pretty much what I just described our bait looked like. It was shorter, a little dumpier, kind of a little fatter, both in height and in width, but the same twitch, the same colors, the same eyes, and it works beautifully. So you actually have two to pick from, the 19MR and the 17MR. They've come out with a lot of other new. They've got a series now called the Skins, which has got they look real. It's got a scale-like skin on it. That's incredible. It's built into the plastic, so I'm not going to call them indestructible because I've had sharks bite them in half. So I mean, I know they can be killed, but the fact that they're really building on this product, I find just it's thrilling. You can find them in Yozuri, Rapala, depends on where you're from. Is how do you pronounce that? I tend to call it Rapala, but they make lots of twitch style baits, lots of really interesting baits out there. My point is, try these things out. For me, the 19MR came as a surprise. Dino was great at getting weird things in and then saying, and then just basically, we were his guides, and he would just hand them to us. He'd say, here, take this and go try this out and let me know what you think. And don't try it for one day. I was lucky on my day. Try it over weather. Go out there on different tides. Go out there on different times of day and let me know what you think about it. How did it work? What did you catch with it? It was like he was the science man. He was really investigating this stuff, and I love that about Dino. That's what I miss about Dino the most. So it's been an amazing time with innovation now, as it's come a long, long way since I first got that particular lure back in 2000. We're 20 years later, 22, Lord, it's 22 years. Holy crap. We're 22 years later. And you think, oh, they can't invent anything else. They can't make anything else. And they do. Every single year, something special comes out. And there's soft plastics, which I'll talk about on another show. There's a whole series of great soft plastics out there right now that you should probably check out. So focus on the hard, focus on twitch, try to find the twitch baits. You'll find that they're very interesting. They are not the easiest thing in the world to use. You're going to have to partake a little action on them yourself. You're going to have to learn to use it. It's not like tossing a bait in that's got a lip on it that you just slowly retrieve or more quickly retrieve. That's not how they work. They need to have a little oomph put into them to really make the fish respond. So I hope you got a lot out of this. I enjoyed talking about it. And I hope you get yourselves out there on the water and get fishing. Springtime's coming. Man, it's right around the corner. Florida warms up before everybody else. So take your hats off, throw them in the air, and it's time to go fishing. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If you enjoyed this podcast, would you please tell a friend? I'd appreciate that too. Catch You Outdoors is hosted by Anchor, available via Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Our Facebook page is Catch You Outdoors. Our website's catchyoutdoors.com. Until next time, get outdoors and enjoy.